Hi, good evening. And first of all, beginning with the features of the DLE program success, when we think of the linguistic features, um, in the dual language, they do have that adherence to the language separation, whether it's by teacher, by day, by time. But that adherence to the language separation is what gives the two languages the attention and the time that they deserve and that they need. Also, a linguistic feature is that the language maintenance of that L1 shows that the linguistic and cognitive development is in place without any detrimental harm for their second language acquisition, or for, in most cases, English, um, and that they're developing their linguistic proficiency and their content mastery simultaneously. So these linguistic features are beneficial because there's not going to be any harm to their language proficiency development and their cognitive development or mastery. For the social cultural features, the the whole point of validating their identity and making them valuable is what will draw them in. The students, yes, and they're going to be more motivated, and that's where we nurture that effective filter. And once that effective filter is nurtured, their participation is more likely. Once they see that they and their language and their culture and everything about them is seen as a resource and as valuable, um, you draw the students in. And like one of the authors mentions, that it's an opportunity to capitalize on those pedagogically rich life experiences. So too many times when we hear that, students, the bilingual students don't have experiences, well, that's not true. They are different experiences. And so this allows for a funds of knowledge approach, where you take the children's backgrounds and you use that as a resource, as a springboard for your curriculum and for learning experiences in the classroom. This is also going to provide the avenue for parental involvement that so many schools are trying to acquire. So again, that pride is what will help, facilitate their involvement, the parental involvement, and the children's involvement as well. As far as the pedagogical features, I think these pedagogical features are what make any teacher a more proficient teacher in general. That I like that it mentions this is the difference between language teaching and foreign language teaching, because instead of just applying it to you're the language teacher or the language arts teacher is the language teacher, it's every content teacher is a language teacher. And that's when we provide, the sheltered instruction and so on. But it's because the content is what's going to provide the context for using the language. And as Krashen has put it before, it's about learning in a language rather than about it. So the experiences are more meaningful, they're more authentic, and it's not like some rote memorization of, this is the pin, hi, my name is, I can count to, X amount of numbers. It's not as robotic. As far as the factors that contribute to the success of the DLE programs, again, that it's an additive approach where language maintenance is priority. This helps because instead of giving students two tasks, like here you go, you're immersed in English, so you're going to have to learn the language and then you're going to be able to unlock the content. Instead of doing those two things, you go straight to the content, and which is one of the reasons why there's just such an overrepresentation of emergent bilinguals in special education and underrepresentation in GT, because they have to do two things, and it makes it appear otherwise that they're not capable of keeping up. But this additive approach is one of the factors that really attributes to their success, because they don't have to do those two things. They go straight into the content. Again, that the program somewhere else in another reading, it says that they tailor the curriculum to foster high levels of content knowledge in both languages. And so those high levels of content knowledge are what are going to lead to those increased cognitive and thinking or process thinking skills. So again, that's going to be something that's going to help, yes, linguistically, but again, cognitively as well. I think one of the biggest factors for the DLE success um, is time. And that's something that my group and I had discussed. And once you're given the time for the language to be acquired and not that rush, like it has to happen in X amount of months, when we give them those years and the models that time to be in place, that's what will lead to more fruitful results. So again, those are some of the features that would lead to the program success. As far as number three, where we evaluate the challenges that the schools may experience, um, honestly, the biggest challenge would be policy. So when Nickleby, for example, came in, there was just this push for English, and it was just constantly reinforced, through assessment and the accountability. And so this push for English, and because people were going to be held accountable to, their careers and their jobs, they started dismantling both the transitional and developmental bilingual programs. They were shutting down because they said, well, it's ineffective to get them ready to pass the English test. And it began, again, because policy was pushing for this. Well, if policy is pushing for English, then so must we. And why maintain the first language if ultimately we want them to learn English? And so I think that's a big challenge because people have a hard time wrapping their mind around the fact that if you maintain the language, that's actually going to help you acquire the second language even faster. If you completely move it aside and do away with it, then that's going to make you acquire the language at a lot slower pace, and really the gap is only going to be widened. So if a student in kindergarten is immersed in all English, that's the smallest that gap will ever be. It's only going to be expanding all the way through their school career, and again, we're failing the students. Now, if they're maintained, the L1, eventually that second language is going to be a lot easier to acquire, and that gap is going to be smaller. But again, that challenge where well, policy favors English, it makes it hard to logically, see that this is what we need, the language maintenance, and which also leads to teachers' perspectives. This is another challenge. Again, if, for example, said, well, I was sink or swim and I'm fine. And again, that's where we find those challenges on those perspectives. And because of their erroneous perspectives, as one of the readings put it, there's going to be poor implementation. And when there's poor implementation, well, of course, there's not going to be much success, because if it's not implemented in the correct way, well, you're going to get the results of the improper implementation. And the whole idea, well, they're going to get confused. The students will be confused when they're seeing the two languages. And as we see this come up over and over as a myth, we see that it is a teacher perspective. And sometimes it's not just teacher perspective, it's through our life experiences. And we have to think, well, okay, well, maybe I made it, but did I see all the people that were drowning behind me? Or if there's a small population, a percentage of the population that can make it that way, does that mean we only teach to that population instead of teaching to, the whole population? Instead of teaching to the ones that might make it, we have to teach to all these other ones that usually will fall behind. So, it would be educator perspectives also, because sometimes it's at the district level, but sometimes it's at the state level or the national level. And when those perspectives are that, sooner into English is what makes sense, which we would call the time on task theorist, if that's what their perspective is, and yet they're the ones with more pull for policy, then it's going to be hard to implement a dual language program, even when research supports it. But if in their perspective and in their mentality, this is just common sense, even when it can't be defended, it becomes a big challenge for dual language advocates, because there's this deficiency of language through their lens, and it's those ideologies of deficiency. As far as the social political implications of the success or failure, we go back to assessment and accountability. The Nickleby push for English, this can be a sign of patriotism. Okay, well, English, and if you live in this country, well, knowing English is part of your pride, your national pride. And so I think that's a big social political implication, because again, it makes it seem like, well, if you keep your L1, that's a sign of your loyalty for your maybe home country. And I think it's more of a fear that they have that loyalty to home country, instead of seeing it, they have that loyalty to themselves and their identity. Um, these negative attitudes about bilingualism, such as, I know they call them in the readings, language parochialism, elitism, and restrictionism, especially with bilingualism of the language minorities. And this is going to, again, lead to that poor implementation and shutting down of bilingual programs, because it's seen in reinforcing the stigma of the minority language, and it's reinforcing the elitism of the majority language. So again, this is what's going to be informing policy. For example, why we have a TELPAS assessment for English language proficiency, but we don't have something that measures bilingual proficiency, something for us to see, are they developing the two languages? It's not something that is we're not held accountable for, and it's not seen as something that's of critical importance, as one of the readings had also mentioned. So I think a lot of this, the social political implication are these language attitudes, and that it says more about what what people would be thinking, more about the way that they think about the speakers of the language group than the actual language itself. If there's these attitudes towards language or bilingualism of the language minorities, it's maybe not anything to do with the language. It's more about the people that are the speakers of it. But that's the gist of what I feel are the political implications, and again, the challenges, the factors of success, and the features that impact the student performance. Thank you.